Sri Lanka has used abductions as a way to instill fear since the days of its civil war. The conflict is over, but critics say authorities are still kidnapping citizens who speak out. This small island nation has one of the highest numbers of unsolved disappearances in the world. Will a new investigation agency help victims and their families get justice? I'm Steve Chow. On this episode of 101 East, we investigate Sri Lanka's enforced disappearances.
Whenever I see a white van, when I see a soldier or policeman, I look at them suspiciously. Even when I think about the moment I was kidnapped, it scares me.
Nihal Sirasinghe never thought he would live to tell his story. He's one of the few in Sri Lanka to survive an abduction. 60,000 others have gone missing over the past 3 decades. It was a sunny morning in May 2009. Nihal was walking near the courthouse in the capital Colombo when a white van started following him. Soon, he was surrounded.
Men put a weapon to my right hip. They told me to shut up and keep walking. A van came up from 100 meters away, and I was dragged into it.
He was thrown into a garage on a coconut estate. Nihal alleges he was tortured by plainclothes men and uniformed officers.
They threw me into this corner and started attacking me. They straightened me and started hitting me with metal pipes.
Using bricks, Nihal plots out a torture chamber 12 feet in length.
It was an area like this. No matter how much I screamed, no one could hear. There was urine and blood all over the place. They took my belt and started beating my back. After that, they dragged me by my legs on the rocks. They hit me in here and here. They also hit my soles of my feet. After that, they filled a plastic bag with petrol and tied my head with it for 2 minutes until I started suffocating. Just when I was about to lose consciousness, they would let go.
During long interrogations, the officers accused Nihal of aiding the Tamil Tigers, a separatist group who fought a 26-year civil war against the Sri Lankan government. Nihal is from the Sinhalese majority, but the trade union publication he worked for promoted the rights of the Tamil minority.
Was there a point where you thought you were going to die?
I had no hope of living at that point. They belted me so much.
Nihal says he was taken to police headquarters, where he says he faced more torture to force him into making a confession. But after 7 years in custody, Nihal was eventually released because there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. Under Sri Lanka's terrorism laws, hundreds of others have also been held in detention for years without charge or access to a lawyer.
With these laws, the government is able to use military personnel to get rid of threats and kidnap people. They can get rid of any threat which opposes the government.
Survivor stories like Nihal's provide a faint glimmer of hope for other families of the disappeared. Sanja Eknaligoda hasn't seen her husband since 2010. Her house is filled with cartoons by the political journalist, who vanished without a trace.
Ever since Pragit disappeared, there's only been sadness and emptiness in this house. If someone is dead, you have their body. You can deal with the emotions and get over their death. If a person is abducted, it's one of the worst crimes out there.
Pragit's cartoons and articles focused on human rights abuses and social inequality in Sri Lanka. His work was published by a left-wing news website, one of the few media outlets that criticised then-President Mahinda Rajapaksa. Sanja says in 2009, her husband started receiving death threats.
He had received a few calls from people threatening to cut his limbs off. He was never scared. However, a week before he went missing, he was worried by one incident. One of Pragit's friends who worked for the government told him he was on top of the Rajapaksa target list.
One night in 2010, Pragit called his wife to say he would be home late. That evening, Pragit's neighbours saw a suspicious white van driving around his house. Pragit has never been seen or heard from again.
I want truth and justice. There's a lot of lies about Pragit in this country. The truth about Pragit must emerge. What happened? What did he do? Who did it?
8 years and 90 court appearances later, she's still searching for the truth. A former army officer came forward and alleged that Pragit was interrogated at a military camp. 11 army officers were arrested in connection with his disappearance, but were later released.
In Legoda's case, definitely a murder. To my conscience, I think he was murdered.
Former Army Chief General Sarath Fonseca has no doubt about what happened to the cartoonist. Pragit disappeared just 5 days before national elections after he'd publicly backed Fonseca over the incumbent president, Rajapaksa.
But why do you think he was abducted?
So what he was doing at that time was not in favor of the other party, Rajapaksa's party. So I am 100% sure they are very angry with him.
The Rajapaksas?
Yes, there is no question, no doubt about it. The whole country believes it, I think.
General Fonseca lost that election, but is now a minister in Sri Lanka's new government, which ousted the Rajapaksa regime in 2015. Fonseca alleges that in the past, rogue elements in the security forces conducted white van abductions to silence critics like Pragit. Sri Lanka passed a new law in April which criminalises enforced disappearances.
And as a government minister, you're quite willing to reprimand people that were under your command that behaved inappropriately? You have no...
Yeah, my time, I never spared anyone. The slightest information I get, wherever I got, I took very stern action. But no man in the security forces can commit murders, crimes. Obviously, if they have done it, they have to be taken to task. They have to, you have to take the legal action against them. I had very good tight control over the military. But there are other people, like some in the police, some in the intelligence agencies, who preferred to please this man and join hands with him.
Who by name?
Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the previous defense secretary.
Was using white vans to...
Yes. Abductions are taking place. Whoever who did that, they did not do it during the process of their the legitimate duties, outside the duties.
101 East approached former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, who declined to comment. In a statement, former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa described Fonseca's claims as baseless allegations. He denies the security forces or government in power at the time carried out enforced disappearances. Human rights activist Ruki Fernando says the authorities have tried to ignore this issue for decades.
Sri Lanka has the second largest number of enforced disappearances reported to the UN after Iraq.
Today, Ruki is going to document some cases in Mullaitivu, on the northern tip of Sri Lanka. In 2009, this district was the front line in the final battles between the separatist Tamil Tigers and the government forces. It was then that some of the country's most notorious disappearances happened. Every day for the past year, Tamil families in towns across the region have been holding vigils. They say many of their relatives were taken by the military and have never been seen again.
I think the pain and the grief and the tears are the same, whether it's Tamil, Sinhalese or Muslim or in any other country for that matter. But what is clearly visible among these Tamil families of disappeared people is their desperation and their anger that there has been no answers forthcoming and they feel cheated.
The protests began when the government backtracked on a promise to release a list of those still in custody. Chelia Sobagiam's son, Namthakuma, is one of those still missing after surrendering to the army at the end of the war.
Our children must come back. That's what we think.
She says the women are prepared to protest until they get answers.
What else am I to do? Where else am I going to go? I have no one at home.
Sobagiam has reported her son's disappearance to the UN and the Red Cross, but she has limited evidence and can't identify the soldiers who took him.
The fact that I surrendered him is the proof. There is no other proof. No proof.
This bridge is where Sobagiam and hundreds of others say they handed over their family members.
It's a mass disappearance. It's several hundred at least, several buses.
Several hundred people went missing from this bridge.
Yes, yes. They have simply vanished in the custody of the army. Not just vanished, but vanished in the custody of the army.
When Sobagiam returns here, the memories flood back.
It happened at about 9 or 10 in the morning. I was looking at my son. He was sitting by the bus window, so I could see him. He was looking at me. He was crying. The soldiers took him, saying that they will release him. They said they would release him in a month. They took him and went.
20 court cases regarding this mass disappearance have dragged on for the last 5 years. No one has ever been brought to justice, and the only army officer to testify offered a blanket denial.
It's an absurd situation for an army of a country to take away its citizens in buses in front of their family members and then claim that they don't know what happened to them. And the army commander, Sarath Fonseca, is now a government minister. He was the army commander when this incident happened on that day in 2009 May. He can't just wash his hands off and say that, no, I don't know what happened.
Where have they gone?
I don't know. I can't visualize how it would have been taking place during the war and last 2 weeks of the war. We had a very good system. We had made beautiful arrangements that everybody coming and surrendering to security forces. I was monitoring personally. I am 100% sure the incidents of this nature never took place. Other people have been taken bus loads and they never returned. That is definitely exaggerated story.
Sarath Fonseca says under his command, all 215,000 Tamils who surrendered in the war were properly processed.
Our conscience are clear.
Your conscience is clear?
Yes. Just because some about 10-15 family members come and say that our children were taken, they have gone missing, you can't take it as gospel truth or something.
But this is not just 10, this is 100, 200.
Yeah, that is the very reason why I'm ruling it out. You can't do things like that, when there are thousands and thousands watching. Then it is not practically possible.
Thanks for having...
To find the truth of what happened to Sri Lanka's disappeared, the government announced 3 years ago it would set up an Office of Missing Persons. Salia Peris and 6 other commissioners were only recently appointed, but the office won't be fully operational for months. He says one of the most pressing cases will be the mass disappearances on the bridge.
Naturally, one would expect that some of the allegations would be against the Sri Lankan authorities. I do not for one moment say that the task is going to be easy. But for the moment, I'm confident that we will have the cooperation of the authorities that I'm confident of.
But the office has no criminal powers and can only refer suspects to the Attorney General.
One must understand the purpose of the Office on Missing Persons. It is not punitive. It is to find out what happened to persons. It is to trace people.
So families of the disappeared may get answers, but not necessarily justice?
That would be by another mechanism.
What do you do?
But in the past, similar commissions have failed to solve any disappearance cases. Ruki is helping affected families write witness statements to present to the Office of Missing Persons. He says many of them don't trust the officials.
One of the reasons is because one of the commissioners who have been appointed is a former army major general. Because for many people, the army is responsible for vast majority of these disappearances. That is true for Tamils, but that is also true for Sinhalese.
The security forces have their own concerns, saying the Office of Missing Persons will subject war heroes to unfair scrutiny.
It's completely biased. When you have people who have been critical of the army as commissioners, I don't think, personally, I would not like to go there and get humiliated. So it's a matter of having credible, neutral people in the commission, rather than having activists and people who have been working for NGOs. We have ministers.
Major General Udaya Pereira was a director of operations in the military during and after the war.
So you're saying that the army is not complicit at all in their disappearance?
I can vouch and say there was no policy of such nature.
So you're saying the use of abductions was never used during war and never used during post-war?
Never used in war, never used in post-war by the army, by the military. This is not a banana state. If someone thinks that Sri Lanka can hide and keep a person in today's context, I think he should go and see a psychiatrist.
But many Sri Lankans insist the authorities are still using enforced disappearances to stifle dissent. Some only feel safe talking about it from the other side of the world.
Tamil asylum seekers here in London claim that they were abducted and abused by the authorities in the past 2 years.
Milton Thusanathan alleges that he was abducted twice, in 2016 and more recently in 2017. The 20-year-old took part in protests where villagers complained that the army was stealing their land to build new bases. One night last June, he says men in a van snatched him off the streets in Mullaitivu and took him to a secret torture site.
They had a long stick. They'd lie me on the ground and beat my back and feet. They'd burn my back and thighs with cigarettes. They used a bottle to sexually abuse me.
Milton says a local priest brokered his release. Then his parents bought him a one-way ticket out of Sri Lanka. He claims his father and other men in his village have also been abducted, tortured, and then released by the police in the last 2 years. Milton believes his family is a target because his uncles fought for the Tamil Tigers.
I think I could be abducted again if I went back. I have no faith in our current government, as they preach something and do something else. If I'm forced back to Sri Lanka, I will commit suicide.
Milton's lawyer says many young relatives of former Tamil Tiger fighters have been kidnapped and tortured in Sri Lanka. Kulasegaram Geetharhanan represents a number of Tamil men who are claiming asylum in the UK because they fear their lives are in danger under Sri Lanka's current regime.
The torture is systematic and widespread. The purpose we can see is to instill a fear among the Tamils, not to revolt again, or at the same time not to give evidence against the war crimes in 2009.
How many cases do you have where Sri Lankans have been abducted and tortured under the current government?
Since 2015, since the new government came into force, we have documented at least 80 cases which had been corroborated by medical evidence and other sources of independent evidence. Most recently, we have in 2018, we have at least 6 cases of torture.
Other asylum seekers in London claim they were abducted and tortured for months before managing to escape Sri Lanka. This man, who we'll call Arjuna, was accused of trying to revive the Tamil Tiger movement, an allegation he denies.
I was there from April to August. They abused me and beat me many times. But I can't tell you certain things about how they tortured me. 2 or 3 times I resisted, but they beat me up. They burned my back with a hot iron rod. I still have the scars. After the beatings, I fainted.
Arjuna says he was held at a military base called Joseph Camp, where he was tortured and sexually abused at least 30 times. He could hear the screams of other men being tortured. These Tamil asylum seekers still carry the scars. Arjuna remains haunted by the experience.
People say that I scream aloud in my sleep. At night, I have bad dreams. Dreams that I'm dead, that I'm being beaten to death.
In art therapy at a London city church, other Tamil asylum seekers captured the beauty of their new home. But Arjuna can't forget the horrors of war. Independent doctors confirm both Arjuna and Milton have injuries consistent with torture. But the UK Home Office has rejected their asylum claims.
I was working in my uncle's shop in Mullaitivu. My father was a fisherman and I'd also get paid to help him. There was no economic hardship. If my life was not under threat, I would be in Sri Lanka with my family.
The Sri Lankan government and the police deny there are torture sites in the country. They say the asylum seekers are economic refugees seeking a better life.
Under this government, there were no events reported like that was on one hand. And this government, the way we are functioning, I don't think there is any room for anyone to commit offences like that at the moment.
So you're confident that the days of the white van are over?
Yeah, not after this government came, definitely.
Despite those denials, the Office of Missing Persons wants to investigate all white van abductions and military bases where torture is said to have occurred.
Can you seek testimony from people who have survived white van abductions?
Yes, yes, we have, and there is provision even by video link to have to listen to witnesses who are not in the immediate presence of the Commission.
Overseas?
Overseas, yes.
The Sri Lankan government is promising to provide compensation to families of the disappeared, if they think it's justified.
If it's a civilian casualty or something like that, innocent person, not involved with illegal battle against the military or against the government, to topple the government, they can be compensated. There is no problem in that.
Sanja Eknalagoda wants all families of the missing to be treated fairly.
I've learned that the pain and sadness is the same for all widows. It doesn't matter if they are from the north or south, Tamil or Sinhalese. Everyone is looking for truth and justice. My fear is, how long will I have to fight this battle?
If enforced disappearances continue with impunity, it's a battle that will tear more Sri Lankan families apart.